In the eerily early hours of a January morning in 1984, a man traveling over the Kalakatavua Bridge in Kerala's Alappuzha district saw a charred body in a burnt car in a nearby farm. He went to a house in the vicinity, and woke up the man living there, Suresh Kumar, who in turn called on another neighbor Radhakrishnan Achari. Both of them went to the side of the burnt car. One door was open, and they saw the body of a man in the driver's seat, so badly burnt that he was unrecognizable. Radhakrishnan went in a neighbor's auto rickshaw to the police station nearby. It was just 5 in the morning when Deputy Superintendent of Police, DSP, Haridas reached the spot, and saw the burnt ambassador car with the number plate KLQ 7831. That was the beginning of what would become a decades-long crime story, one of the most infamous in Kerala, the Chacko murder case and the fugitive Sukumara Kurup. In his memoir Dead Men Tell Tales, late police surgeon Dr. B. Umadodhan describes the incidents of that day, January 22, 1984, when the burnt body was found in the car. The first witnesses of the incident identified the car as belonging to Sukumara Kurup. People thought the dead man was Kurup, who had come down from Abu Dhabi days ago. However, DSP Haridas still wrote it down as said to be Sukumara Kurup. Only a pair of gloves and an empty petrol can were found at the site, nothing to identify Kurup except the car. Umadodhan did the post-mortem but the body was not identifiable, it was just too charred. There were also no objects, rings, watches or even slippers, that could be used in the identification. The only piece of clothing was a half-burnt undergarment. But then Umadodhan made another discovery. When I examined the parts of the body that hadn't been scorched, I couldn't see any signs of the body being burnt while alive. Then I cut open the body to examine the lungs and trachea. I was sure that my assumptions were right. There was no sign of soot inside. If he had been alive while the car was burning, smoke and soot would have entered the body, Umadodhan writes. It became clear that the man was murdered before his body was burnt. From traces of a brown liquid, and reactions of a toxic substance on the abdomen, Umadodhan also guessed that the man may have been poisoned. He deduced that the man was between 30 and 35 years, and 6 feet tall. Afterwards, the body was handed over to Kurup's relatives, who buried it in the compound of his house. The next clue waited for them at the police station where Bhaskar Pillai, Kurup's brother-in-law, was summoned. He had told the police that he suspected Kurup's enemies in Abu Dhabi to be behind the murder. An observant Haridas noticed that Pillai wore a full-sleeved shirt, when it was not the norm those days. Haridas got Pillai to roll up his sleeves, and found burn marks all over his hands. On further examination, Umadodhan found that parts of Pillai's face, elbow, foot, and even hair showed signs of burning. Pillai, caught in a tight spot, suddenly confessed to killing Kurup for cheating him by taking money, and not getting him a job abroad. Forensic experts found evidence of Pillai's presence at the crime scene. His hair, and the hair found on the gloves belonged to the same person. Soon, Haridas's hunch that the dead person may not be Kurup proved correct. One of Kurup's relatives called to say that Kurup had not died. An unsurprised Haridas revealed then that he had sent policemen in mufti to Kurup's house the day the body was found. No one was mourning, and a chicken curry, a celebratory dish in those days, was being cooked. It also emerged that Kurup used to use another car when he came home for vacations, a taxi driven by a man named Ponnappan. During the discovery of the burnt car and the dead body, there was no sign of the taxi or Ponnappan. When Ponnappan finally made an appearance, people standing around Kurup's compound jumped on him. A scared Ponnappan told them he had dropped some customers in Alappuzha, but when Kurup's uncle questioned him, he told a story about hitting a man accidentally while driving with Kurup. When they realized the man had died, they brought him to the field and burnt him along with the car, he said. There were two different versions about the burnt body already: Bhaskar Pillai's confession about killing Kurup for revenge, and Ponnappan's story about a hit and run. It didn't add up. Haridas was too experienced to believe Ponnappan's version. You don't accidentally run over a man and kill him and then burn the dead body in your own car. Umadadhan had scientific reasons for disbelieving the story. There were no accident-related injuries found during the post-mortem. The police were a tad late to reach Alappuzha, where Ponnappan confessed he had dropped Kurup. Staff members at a lodge recognized photos of Kurup as the man who had stayed there, and left only hours earlier. The handwriting in the lodge register also matched Kurup's. It took another round of questioning with Bhaskar Pillai, for the pieces of truth to finally emerge. When Kurup came on leave from Abu Dhabi on January 6, 1984, he had with him a man called Shahu from Chabakkud. Pillai, Ponnappan, Kurup, and Shahu began discussing a crazy scheme that Kurup came up with. He had taken an insurance policy of 50 rupees lakh in Abu Dhabi, and wanted to fake his own death in an accident so he could claim the money. He promised to share it with the three others and everyone was game. The idea came from a similar case of insurance fraud in Germany. At first their plan was to get a dead body similar in size to Kurup. They tried to get one from the Alappuzha Medical College with the relatives' help, then they tried to dig one up from a cemetery, but nothing worked. So, they decided to find a random man who fitted Kurup's description, and kill him and pass his body off as Kurup's. Just as soon as such a vile plan was hatched, all men were somehow on board. They drove around a lot through the roads of Alappuzha, until they found a victim on the night of January 21st. The poor man, similar in size and age to Kurup, was standing outside the Hari Theatre in Karavata, and had the misfortune to ask these strangers for a ride home. The other 3 men were in the car while Kurup waited for them at a lodge. Once inside the car, the man was forced to consume alcohol and ether by Pillai. The man refused the drink twice, until Pillai's tone became menacing and he drank it out of fear. He fell unconscious, and Pillai strangled him to death with a towel. The men took the dead body to a house owned by Kurup, who reached there from the lodge. They removed the man's clothes and burnt his face and head to make it unidentifiable, and removed all his clothes and accessories, ring, watch, etc. He was then dressed in Kurup's clothes. The 4 men drove to a field, placed the body behind the steering wheel, and burned the car. Pillai lit the fire, and that's when he sustained the burns. Bomadhathan's account says that Pillai knew nothing about the man he killed, except that he was as tall as Kurup. The identity of the dead man came to light after a police station in Haripad reported that a film representative called Chacko was missing. His brother Thomas had given a complaint, which said that Chacko had gone to a movie theater in Karavata, but didn't come back home. It was still only an informed guess and the body had to be identified scientifically. The police decided to exhume the body for another post-mortem. Bomadhathan, an expert on the technique of superimposition, used to identify skeletal remains using an enlarged photo placed over the X-ray of the skull, got a photo of Chacko to superimpose it over the skull of the dead man. Luckily, the skull and bones of the right foot were not completely burnt. It was still not easy. The upper part of the skull was missing. The lower part of the jawbone was burnt, but the rest of the face matched. Bomadhathan also recreated the right foot, another tough task, given he only had the dead man's bones. He connected the bones with wires and then worked with another doctor, called Uni, then to figure out how much flesh was on the foot. They used clay for flesh and tried Chacko's footwear on the reconstructed foot. It fitted perfectly. Indentations of 2 toes also matched exactly, Bomadhathan writes. It was the first time in the country that a dead man's foot had been thus recreated.